Welcome to the Pat White Show.
Well, most Americans have heard about a suicide attempt, and it wasn't an attempt, it was a full suicide, that happened in Las Vegas, Nevada, involving a 37-year-old Marine by the name of Matthew Leivensberger, 37 years of age, a master sergeant in the Marines. You don't get to be a master sergeant easy. He'd served 19 years in the Corps. Now, he committed suicide in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. And here's the deal. A lot of people thought, well, he's trying to say something against Trump or whatever. Turns out, no, it wasn't the case. His family said he was a big Trump fan and voted for Trump. But he said, hey, this was his own doing. He made his decision to do this himself. He said, hey, America, wake up. Things are getting bad out there. We're being led by leaders who only care about themselves. And he said, this is the only way I have of telling people what's going on. Now, you haven't heard much of the news about it, have you? Well, no, because, well, it's not against Trump. He was a big Trump fan. It's about what happened to him. And you have to understand something. This guy was in special forces. He has not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 Bronze Stars. 1 star with a V for valor in battle. Folks, you don't get 5 Bronze Stars by sitting around doing nothing. He was in special forces. Special forces do things you don't want to talk about, you don't want to know about, you don't want to hear about. But it's things that resonate and stay with them for their lives. They get memories and things that come back, visual memories. Well, he ended up dating a girl and that he discovered online, and she was a former nurse at a place called Randstuhl Medical Center, which is in Germany, where they send the worst injured people from Afghanistan to this hospital. They do their best they can with them and then send them back to the United States. Well, this woman was a nurse at that hospital, and she had ultimately left the military, and they met online in Colorado. And it turns out they dated from like 2018 to 2022, somewhere in that range. And he talked to her a lot and about the problems he was having, the memory problems, the emotional problems, the things that were weighing on him big time. And she said, hey, man, you got to get help on this. You got some problems. He said, no, I can't do it because that would show I'm weak in my unit. Special forces, he said, if they think you've got a mental health or mental injury going on, you're mentally defunct or whatever, you won't be in the unit anymore. His unit did a lot of things. As a matter of fact, one of the things that happened was he got a tattoo on his arm, tattoo of 2 skulls with bullets going through it. And he got those to talk about the people he had lost, friends in his unit, and the people he had killed. Now, you got to understand something. This guy, he had been through more than any person you could possibly imagine. He was living with what had happened. I mean, there are things that in those kind of situations, people, you have memory lapses, you have a rough time. And that time he was dating this Alicia, and she knew it. She knew something was going on. Now, they broke up in I think it was 2021 when they broke up. And he ultimately got married, had a child. But she received 2 texts from him in the later part of December. I think around December 28th, December 31st. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. And he was just trying to be light, but he knew and she knew something was going on. Now, he had been to Afghanistan more times than you want to talk about. And those missions, you're exposed to things, you do things you don't want to hear about, you don't want to see. And anybody who understands anything about the military, especially special forces, they do some pretty ugly things, folks. So, what happened was he said, hey, look, America, you got to stand up and see what's going on. This is bad. America's not in a good spot right now. So the only way to do that was to show what was going on. So he drove this this Tesla. He rented. It was not his. He rented the vehicle, put a whole bunch of explosives in it, parked there under the portico, the portico of the Trump Hotel, put a gun in his mouth and killed himself. Car blew up ultimately. But I want you to understand something. This was a guy that was suffering from mental issues, but he couldn't do anything because he said, if I do, I won't be in my unit anymore. Master Sergeant in his unit, 19 years, he was the leader of his group. But he was having mental and emotional problems that were killing him on the inside. And ultimately, he took his own life. Sad story, yes. But he was trying to tell folks, wake up. We're doing things we shouldn't be doing. And apparently one of the things was in Afghanistan. Wars that we apparently didn't belong being in. And as a result, a 37-year-old, 19-year Master Sergeant in the Marines, Special Forces, took his own life. Because it was the only way he could say, hey, folks, pay attention to what's going on. Something you should know that maybe you didn't know, but now you do. Well, if you're a fan of Costco and you hold a Costco card and that's where you go to buy your stuff, and if you're one of those people that drinks coffee, now I'm not a coffee drinker, so this wouldn't affect me, but if you're one of those coffee drinker people, especially someone who goes to Costco, gets a bag of beans, and decides to use the grinder that they have at Costco. Now, I'm not sure every Costco has one, but apparently a number of Costcos around the United States are shutting down their grinders, turning them off, putting up a sign telling people, sorry, you can't use the grinder anymore because you're breaking it. That's exactly what's happened. On a weekly situation, people are putting stuff in the coffee grinding machines they shouldn't put in the coffee grinding machines. Here's one of the situations. Chocolate-covered beans. Now, like I said, I don't drink coffee, but chocolate-covered beans, people are putting them in the grinder to grind their beans up so they get ground beans with chocolate in it. Messes up the burrs in the coffee grinding machine. Oh, and here's something even worse. People are putting nuts into the coffee grinding machines. You heard me right. Taking nuts, putting them in. And obviously that also messes off the burrs in the coffee grinder. These coffee grinders at Costco have cost thousands of dollars. It's not like something you buy over at the service merchandise for $29.95. These are pretty expensive items. And now they're putting up signs saying, sorry, we're not doing this anymore. Is it happening at every Costco? I can't say. Is it happening at our local Costco? I don't know because I don't buy coffee. But if you happen to go to your Costco and you want to get your coffee ground, you find out the machine's not working, now you know. Us people are doing stupid things. And here's the one that really caught me the most attention. Apparently in one store, their coffee grinder is in their food court area. You know, that's where you go buy the $1.50 hot dog and whatever else they're selling. And somebody in the coffee grinder at a food court at a Costco put in a hot dog. You heard me right. Put a hot dog into the coffee grinding machine. You know, the level of stupidity that some people will reach is beyond my comprehension. But since I don't drink coffee, since I don't buy coffee, I guess I shouldn't worry about it. But if you're a coffee drinker and you like to get your bags of whole bean coffee and have it ground, sort of like they used to do at the Kroger back in the old days, if you remember those days. Maloney, Scott's, yeah, they all did it. Well, they don't do it anymore at most of the Costco's. Why? Because there's idiots out there. And idiots are doing stuff they're not supposed to do simply because they think they can do it because it doesn't belong to them. Stupidity reigns, folks. And Costco has had enough. Well, I don't know if you're a smoker or not. I do not smoke and never have. And these days, I guess the number of people who smoke is down, well, probably less than 25% of the population, maybe even less than that. But the Biden administration, in another one of their 11th hour moves, has decided to, well, ban cigarettes. Well, not really ban them if you think about it. What they've said is, we're going to massively lower the amount of nicotine in tobacco products, whether they're cigarettes or other tobacco products. And we're doing this because, well, we can. Now, what's the result of that going to be? Well, I can tell you there's a lot of folks unhappy out there that the Biden administration is doing all these last-second initiatives to make life more difficult for the incoming administration. This one, though, could cause some very big problems that apparently no one has thought about, or at least they're not talking about it, because here's the thing. Those people who smoke, and you probably know some, and I know some, well, you cut down the nicotine out of their cigarettes, you know what they're going to do? They're going to buy more cigarettes. They're going to smoke more cigarettes. Because the nicotine level, the body likes nicotine, wants a certain amount of nicotine, and that's how the body works. Fortunately, I don't smoke, I don't care. But for those people that do buy cigarettes, if they can't get what they want in the cigarettes, yes, some of them will probably stop smoking, and that's perfectly fine, and I agree with that. But there's a diehard group that won't. And what's going to happen is they're going to look for a place to find cigarettes that have the level of nicotine in because they are addicted. They are addicted to nicotine just like, well, many people are addicted to caffeine in coffee. You heard me right. Caffeine is another drug that exists in coffee, and some people are flat out addicted to it and have to have it. And if they don't get it, they get rather crunchy. Well, tobacco's pretty much the same way. So, the Biden administration says we're going to cut down the level of nicotine in products. People are going to find a different place to buy them, and that's where organized crime and the cartels will step in. Just remember, now you probably don't remember this, but back in the Prohibition days, you couldn't get alcohol. Well, because you couldn't get alcohol, guess what? Organized crime was bringing in alcohol. That's what people wanted. So, if you want to have organized crime bringing in cigarettes under the table, not taxed, by the way, all you got to do is keep lowering things down, saying, yeah, we're doing this for the betterment of everybody else. But are you really doing it? So another instance of the Biden administration doing something at the very last second to screw things up for the next administration coming in. They ain't done, and then sadly, it's going to be a mess to get sorted out after the new administration takes hold on January the 20th. Well, I don't know if you've heard about a lawsuit against CNN. It seems like there's so many lately. But this is a doozy. And this is one going on in Panama City, Florida. Now, Panama City is right there on the handle of Florida, the panhandle they call it. And that entire area of Florida, well, that's very heavy military and very heavily conservative. And to be honest with you, the lawsuit is against CNN. So you can imagine that in Panama City, Florida, they're not playing CNN on the TVs in the airports, if I know what I mean. Well, anyway, it turns out that CNN and a program called The Lead with Jake Tapper. This goes back to November 11th in 2021, and he did a story that said this particular gentleman, a former Navy individual, was getting people out of Afghanistan who wanted to leave when we pulled out. And that they said, well, he's doing it illegally. He's making money off of it. These people aren't getting out. And it was essentially a smear campaign against U.S. Navy veteran Zachary Young. So Mr. Young said, I've had enough, but he filed a lawsuit against CNN for defamation. Well, guess what? That defamation is going to trial. That's correct, because the judge, Judge Henry, said, you know what? Even though CNN tried to apologize, the apology ain't enough. So the trial is going forward. Now, when you have a trial, you have a thing called voir dire. That's where both the attorneys from both sides get to interview potential witnesses and ask them all sorts of questions. And, of course, the potential jurors were peppered on everything you could think about. Things like the media, on veterans, on punitive damages, whether they own stock in CNN's parent company, which is Warner Brothers. And so anyway, they asked what they did for a living, all sorts of stuff. And one of the things they asked about CNN, what do you people think of CNN? The majority, I'm telling you, majority of people that were being questioned said, I dislike the media, especially CNN, many of them said. Another one said, I'm not a fan of CNN. And one gentleman said, hey, listen, I got nothing against CNN, but hey, I'm hyperactive and I gotta pee. Well, as it turns out, all of these people that said they were against CNN, none of them were picked for the jury. But a jury of 8 people, six jurors and 2 alternates were selected. And right now, this trial, they say, could end up in a punitive defamation case against Mr. Young Zachary. It could end up being costing CNN in Panama City, Florida, a very red conservative area. It cost them punitive damage, could be as much as $100 million because of what CNN and Jake Tapper's story said about Zachary Young, saying he was defrauding people and is getting people out of Afghanistan. But even though CNN apologized, the judge said, sorry, that ain't enough, dudes. So how that trial end up, I don't know yet. We'll find out. And regardless of the way it ends up, if CNN loses and given a heavy fine, they're going to appeal it. You know that's going to happen. So let's wait and see what happens. Trial in Panama City, Florida. CNN being sued for defamation by a former Navy enlistee trying to get people out of Afghanistan. He said he was smeared by CNN. And he's filed a lawsuit, and the defamation trial is going on. How it end? Nobody knows yet. But it could be very, very interesting. We'll keep our eyes on that one. Well, as you know, a number of companies are dropping their DEI, or what I like to call DIE policy, wokeism. And the company list is now growing even larger because it started out with Walmart, then it went to Ford Motor Company, John Deere, Lowe's, Toyota, and more. But this is a big one that announced today that they are now dropping the DEI mentality. You know who it is? McDonald's. That's right. Today, McDonald's announced that, well, they are getting out of the whole DEI concept. They said, okay, hey, this ain't working. Well, that's fast food giant, folks, and they're the first company to do it in the year 2025. Will there be more to follow? My guess is probably yes, because companies have figured out this whole DIE concept, DEI, call it what you want, doesn't work. You can't tell people what to do and how to do it. That's not the way the companies work, and you're just going to drive your product into the ground. Other companies have kind of figured that out who've done that. So now McDonald's joins a list of other companies around the United States that have said, hey, we're going to quit doing this thing because they had all these special surveys, these inclusion teams, diversity. No, they had quotas, and that's what this was quota hiring. And especially the Human Rights Campaign Corporate Equality Index. That was the worst one, and McDonald's has said, no, we ain't doing that anymore either. So they have finally figured out that DEI is DIE, die. It's done, it's dead. Will other companies start doing it now that McDonald's has done it? Well, we can certainly hope. So maybe, just maybe, America is reverting back to being a regular country. You know, we ain't perfect, we never will be. But when you start doing these kind of things involving quotas and situations like that, that harkens back to a day when, well, it didn't work. And it doesn't work today. So my hat's off to the folks at McDonald's finally saying the wokeism and DEI does not work and are abandoning it. So McDonald's, congratulations. Let's hope you're not the last company to do it. Let's hope you're the first this year, and there will be a whole lot more. Well, unless you've been living under a rock in the last few years, and you happen to be a member of Facebook or Instagram, And you go on, you see something, and you see a little thing on a story that's been, oh, it's not right, it's wrong, it's in error, whatever. And fact-checking was done. And that's been going on since 2019, when Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook and Instagram, the guy who created all this stuff, got with a new company called Lead Stories. Now, I didn't know this company existed. It's a third-party company that checks all the stories on Facebook and Instagram. And if their fact-checkers decide the story's not legitimate, honest, or what have you, they can axe the story, dump the story, put in their own conversation, put in their own wording in there. And turns out that many of the fact-checkers for this company, Lead Story, are ex-CNN employees. I didn't know that. Well, Mark Zuckerberg recently had a meeting with Donald Trump and he had the meeting, and the meeting ended up with Zuckerberg coming out and saying, hey, you know what? I am going to get rid of Lead Stories. I'm going to fire that organization, and we're going to open up the Facebook and the other platforms like Instagram and what have you, sort of like X, what X does, and having the community handle the stories themselves. Well, the people over at Lead Stories are very, very upset that they have been fired. Well, you know what? I don't care. Because when I realize that some of the people at this Lead Stories who are editing people's stories, things that you write or I write or anybody else writes, and they happen to be former CNN people, and we know the mentality and we know the philosophy of people that worked at CNN and the people that continue to work at CNN. So, what we have learned that Zuckerberg had a come-to-Jesus meeting with Donald Trump, and Trump said, this crap's got to quit. You're done doing that. And now Mark Zuckerberg said, yep, we're getting rid of the Lead Stories company, no longer going to have the fact-checking, leave it open to the public. It is a town square issue. Let them deal with it, and that's where it's going to be. So, if you're someone that had something published on Facebook and then suddenly fact-checkers come in and say, nope, that ain't legit, that ain't real, we're Xing it out. Lead Stories apparently was a company that did that. That company has been fired by Mark Zuckerberg, and they are not happy about it. I don't know where they're going to go, and frankly, I don't care. But now you know something you didn't know. Lead Stories, the fact-checkers on Facebook and Instagram, have been fired by Mark Zuckerberg after his meeting with Donald J. Trump, and the word got out, and now somebody's on the street, and I couldn't be happier. Well, here it is on the 7th day of January of 2025, and right now it appears that Pete Hegseth, former Army veteran, will, and I repeat, will be confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the Secretary of Defense. Yes, you heard it here. Right now it appears that Pete Hegseth has enough Republican votes to pass through Congress and the Senate, because the Senate does the authorization on this. He has enough votes to be crowned, or king, whatever you want to call it, as the new Secretary of Defense. Now, here's something you should know about. He has to appear in front of the Senate on January the 14th. I can guarantee you virtually every television network, at least most of them as near as I can tell, will definitely be watching that hearing, because they're going to want to see how Pete Hegseth handles the questioning by the senators that he is definitely going to get. But right now they say the votes are enough to take it out of committee and to take it to the full floor of the Senate, and he will win confirmation. Now, that's kind of an interesting thing, because Pete Hegseth, he's one of those people that's saying, hey, the military's got trouble, and the one thing he wants to get rid of is this wokeism, this DEI, all the stuff that's been manifesting in the United States military. And as one who was a member of that, I can tell you that definitely needs to go. They've got situations in the military that you would be astounded. And they're saying, well, why can't the military get people to join? Because people know what they're getting into, and it ain't good. So, Pete Hegseth, if he does in fact get confirmed, and right now the powers that be say he will. Pete has said, I'm going to go in there and clean this place up and then be the spokesman for people joining the military. And imagine, if Pete Hegseth was talking to your kid, hey, come on in and join. Pete is a veteran who has served. He's got the accommodations, and believe me, he knows what he's talking about. He's very dead set on making sure the military is a fighting force because that's what it's supposed to be. So, will he be approved? Right now, the powers that be say yes, he will. And if he is, well, you're going to get a chance to find out on January the 14th when he gets his official hearing in front of the United States Senate Committee. Be watching, and you may learn something about Pete. He knows what he wants, and he is going to convince the senators he should be the Secretary of Defense. I'm waiting to see, and it's going to be a very interesting meeting. Well, right now we live in the age of muscle cars, and I remember muscle cars back in the 1960s when everybody wanted to have one. Well, today muscle cars actually exist. Here's one in particular, a Dodge Charger Hellcat. Now, that's a fast little automobile, and apparently the police in the state of Arkansas were looking for a stolen vehicle, a stolen Dodge Charger Hellcat that somebody had registered with a fake VIN number. It had been stolen out of a dealership in Tennessee, Nashville, I believe it was. Oh, make that Memphis. And a police officer, state police officer in Arkansas, spotted the car. Well, he tried to identify the car, tried to get the stop going on, put the lights and sirens on. Well, the gentleman driving the Dodge Charger Hellcat decided he wasn't going to stop. Now, there are situations where people get a car and they find out, hey, the car was stolen, they got it wrong, and they lose the car. It does happen. But when someone decides they're going to go on the run, they pretty well know the car they've got is not theirs. Well, as it turns out, speeding across the interstates in Arkansas at speeds exceeding 160 miles an hour. So the state troopers trying to follow this guy, and this Dodge Hellcat is a super car, if you will, a muscle car. Well, they're going down roads and streets and what have you at high speeds. Police officers trying to get this vehicle. But that little Hellcat, that ain't going to be stopped by nobody. And the driver in there is going, yeah, I'm going to get away from this cop, and decides he's going to make a run for it. Well, little did he realize that one of the roads he had taken off the main interstate happened to have a railroad crossing in it. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever been to a road and a railroad crossing, in many cases, it's sort of like a hump, you know? Kind of goes up, the railroad track is up here, and then it kind of goes down. So you got a hump going on. Well, this gentleman driving in this Dodge Charger Hellcat, he didn't see that coming, and when he did, it was like watching the Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah, it was. That car went flying through the air because it hit that bump, and it was like a ramp setting it off. I mean, it'll be pretty good in a movie. Well, it ends up flying through the air and collides with a pole, smashes up, turns into a ball of fire. Now you're saying, well, what about the poor guy who was driving it? What happened to him? He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And you know what? He was ejected from the car. I'm not kidding you. Now, did he survive? Believe it or not, he did. So he is now in the hospital recovering from his accident, if you will, and will be facing charges. And I can just imagine what it's like when he goes into the courtroom and the judge says, you were driving at 160 miles an hour. What were you trying to do? And he's going to say, get away from the cop. And you didn't know that you didn't pull over? Well, no, I didn't. And I wonder what the attorney representing this gentleman is going to be saying to the court, in court. Your Honor, my client, he made a mistake. 160 mile an hour mistake, yeah. The pictures tell it all. And now you've seen them. So, that being said, you've got a muscle car, and it ain't yours, don't be running, because it could cost you in more ways than you could ever imagine. Well, if President Biden's goal is to anger as many Americans as possible on his way as he shuffles out of the White House, well, he's done some more recently to do it. He just announced prohibiting oil and gas companies for searching for oil and gas in all federal waters that are controlled by the United States. Basically said, don't care, you can't search for oil and gas anywhere in the waters surrounding America. Well, that's an executive order, and that one's going to be a tough one to beat, but I'm sure Donald Trump is going to try. But the one that bothers me even more than that, simply because of my service in the military, has to do with medals, giving out medals. And if you know anything about medals, the Presidential Medal of Freedom has always been considered to be one of the higher medals given out by the president by someone who's really accomplished something in America. Well, recently Joe Biden, did this. I'll tell you what he did. He gave out about 17 medals, and frankly, two people he gave it to I'm a little bit unhappy about. It's sort of like the Oprahization of medals. Oh, here's a medal for you, here's a medal for you, because he gave a Presidential Medal of Freedom to Hillary Clinton and you're not going to believe it when I say this, George Soros. You heard me right. Hillary Clinton, okay, she's run for president, and I understand that, but she got away with some things that, frankly, other people shouldn't get away with, but she did. But awarding the Presidential Medal to Hillary and then George Soros, who's, well, basically a socialist, or close to it, and spending money to put socialist people into office to essentially drag down this country. And then after that, the Presidential Medal was awarded to, are you ready? Liz Cheney and Representative Bernie Thompson of Massachusetts for their work in the January 6th committee, which history is going to show that was a basic farce. And those Medal of Freedoms were given out, and I used to believe the Medal of Freedom was important. Well, big thing is this. Those medals used to be something important, but now from my viewpoint, they're not. They're given away like they're wafers at a candy store. Anybody who made him look good, fine, here's a medal for you, here's a medal for you. Sorry, no longer does that Presidential Medal of Freedom really mean what I think it used to mean. And that comes from someone who feels medals are pretty doggone important if you served in the military. Because getting medals in the military, you're really supposed to deserve it to get it. I'm not sure the people who have got this Presidential Medal of Freedom actually deserve it. Hillary Clinton? No, I don't think so. George Soros? Definitely not. And, some other folks I don't even want to get into. But now you know who got the Medal of Freedom, and does that lessen the quality and the value of it? In my opinion, it certainly does. My opinion, and I'm sticking to it. And I'm sure a lot of other folks feel the same way as I do. Well, the Joe Biden administration is basically starting to run out of steam, run out of gas, if you will. Their term is about to say bye-bye, but they're not leaving without a fight, trust me. Here's the latest piece of information that's come out of the Biden administration, and it has to do with his official Surgeon General. His name is Vivek Murthy. It seems that the Surgeon General has decided that drinking alcohol will cause cancer. And it may be. Frankly, about anything you do nowadays will cause cancer, depending on whom you ask. After all, we have got to have a label on cigarettes that says, cigarettes cause cancer. Well, the Surgeon General, on his way out of office, wants to mandate, and yes, I use the term mandate, that alcoholic beverages be labeled the same way that cigarettes are labeled. Caution, consuming this could cause cancer. Now, what is that going to accomplish? Well, gee, honey, I can't drink this beer because it's going to cause cancer. Well, how about can't eat this Twinkie over here because it's going to cause cancer because all all of the chemicals that are in it that may poison my body. Can't eat this cereal because there's all these particular dyes in there and bad things that could cause cancer and kill me. So do we respect the Surgeon General saying, well, we have got to label alcohol as cancer causing? Sir, I can label about anything you can think of causing cancer. As a matter of fact, you might want to ask Robert Kennedy about all the stuff that is outlawed in the country of England that we have in the United States. Same product, except the ingredients inside of that product are different. And that includes cereals their kids eat. So, can all of those things cause cancer? Well, Robert Kennedy says they can. And that's why he wants them out of our cereals like they do in places like, Canada, England, what have you. So, but to say, well, we're going to get rid of alcohol because we've got to put a label on it saying, don't drink booze, it causes cancer. That's your call. But if that's what you're doing just as you're leaving office, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to a whole lot of folks. Because I can start going down a list of a whole lot of stuff that they say could cause cancer. And I don't see you labeling any of those things in any way, shape, or form. So yes, that's my thought. Just trying to do something before you get out of office to make a name for yourself. Well, in this case, it ain't gonna work. Well, a member of the Washington Post staff has decided to resign. Her name is Ann Telnaris, I believe that's how it's pronounced. She is the political cartoonist for the newspaper. She's been there as a political cartoonist since 2008, and yes, she's won a Pulitzer. But a cartoon she decided she wanted to run in the newspaper, and here is the cartoon. She said they refused to run it. And because they refused to run it, she said, I quit. Well, ma'am, you have every right to do that. But you also indicated that previously you've had some issues before with the newspaper and on some of your cartoons. Well, political cartoonists can't have their stuff withheld. That's the decision made by the editor of the newspaper. And it turns out the newspaper editor said the reason we decided not to use it is that we'd already run a column about this. And the picture, the editorial cartoon says, well, there's a picture of Donald Trump, or at least an image thereof, with all these so-called big-time folks like Jeff Bezos, who owns the newspaper that she's working for, offering money to Trump, sort of like they're bending over and kissing the ring. Now, she decided she wanted to quit over this. Well, okay, fine. When the newspaper refused to do an endorsement of Kamala Harris, saying, hey, we're not doing an endorsement, a number of members of the editorial board quit. Fine. 2 of them quit. 2 columnists quit. And 200,000 people canceled their subscription to the Washington Post. That's their call. That's the way it is, folks. A newspaper is supposed to work both sides of the equation. They're supposed to tell everything that's going on. They are the fifth estate. Now, all that being said, I'll tell you a story about what happened about, I'm going to say, maybe 25, 30 years ago. I had a artist that worked for me, and he also freelanced at the local newspaper, our afternoon newspaper, which was a conservative newspaper. And he drew up a cartoon, political cartoon, that showed a outline of where a person had died in the street, where they would run a chalk around the body of the outline of the person. And there was a button laying there in the area of the chest of the person laying, or the chalk drawing, that said Shop South. Now, back in those days, the city was trying to get people to shop south because, well, the violence was going on that side of the city, and that cartoon apparently was going to offend somebody. So the newspaper axed the cartoon and fired the cartoonist, which happened to be a person who worked for me. Well, there's the deal. It can happen at any time, any place, anywhere. You can lose your job. In this case, she did not lose her job. In this case, she got indignant and she quit. Now, there's a difference there. Firing somebody is one thing, but when the editor says, nah, we're not going to run that because we've already run something before, that's the editor's call. But if that's what you want to believe, then have at it. And ma'am, I hope you find yourself another newspaper to work for in the future. I'm sure there's one that will hire you. So there you go, folks. You can do things good or do things bad. You have a decision to make when you publish something. It may cost you your job, or you may get indignant and say, I'm going to leave. I don't like the way they're treating me. Just something to think about in today's world.